I always thought our marriage was unbreakable, until I witnessed my cheating wife being intimate with another man in a caf. It started as a simple game, a harmless little idea I entertained during slow stretches at work or in the quiet moments of the day. What if I surprised Sophia today? The thought made me smile. Maybe I'd show up with her favorite flowers, or take her out for lunch to brighten an otherwise dull Wednesday. It wasn't about grandeur, just small gestures to keep things fresh to remind her. That's how I ended up in the cafe parking lot that afternoon. I picked up a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite, and planned to drop by. Unannounced, I was excited. I pictured the way her face would light up, her delighted laugh, the way her hand would reach for mine, across the table. But, as I stepped out of the car, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a subtle itch at the back of my mind. I brushed it aside. I was probably overthinking. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What could possibly go wrong with surprising my wife? The cafe was cozy and familiar. It smelled of roasted coffee and fresh pastries. The soft hum of conversation and clinking mugs created a warm backdrop. I spotted her almost immediately. Sophia's bright red scarf was hard to miss. But then my smile faltered. She wasn't alone. She sat at a corner table, leaning in close to a man I didn't recognize. He had sharp features, a clean-cut look, and a polished air about him. They were deep in conversation. She was smiling that smile, the one she used to give me when we first started dating, the one I hadn't seen in months at first. I told myself, it was nothing. Maybe it was a co-worker or a client, but the way they were sitting, the way her laughter reached him, the way his hand brushed against hers, it didn't feel right. My chest tightened. My first instinct was to confront her, to walk straight to their table and ask who this man was. But I stopped myself. I needed clarity. I needed proof. So I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling, and dialed her number. She didn't notice at first. Her phone sat on the table, beside her coffee cup. It buzzed once, twice. Then her eyes darted to the screen. She hesitated, glanced at the man, then let it ring out. My heart sank. I called again. This time she picked up, her voice bright and cheerful, but forced. Hey babe, what's up? My stomach churned at her tone. Where are you? Trying to keep my voice steady work. She lied smoothly. Big meeting day, why? I stared at her from across the room. Barely 10 FT away. That's funny. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice sharp, because I'm looking right at you. Her face drained of color. She froze, her phone still pressed to her ear. Our eyes locked. She looked like a deer caught in headlights. The man frowned, glancing between us, clearly confused, but not saying a word. The conversation around us faded into the background. As I walked toward their table, each step heavier than the last, Sophia scrambled to recover her laugh, shaky and unconvincing. Oh hey. Her voice rising in pitch. What a surprise. What are you doing here? I ignored her attempt at casualness, my gaze shifting to the man. Who's this? The man shifted uncomfortably, his polished confidence faltering. Sophia jumped in before he could speak. Just a friend from work, she said quickly. We're discussing a project. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity at the office. Oh wait, no, this doesn't look like your office. Her cheeks flushed, and for a moment, she was speechless. The man stood abruptly, raising his hands as if to calm the situation. Hey man, this isn't what it looks like. I laughed, bitterly. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Because it looks like my wife is lying to me. Why don't you enlighten me? He glanced at Sophia, waiting for her to take the lead. But she just sat there, silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. That's what I thought. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice. Rising heads turned toward us as conversations hushed. Sophia finally snapped, her tone sharp and defensive. Can we not do this here? You're making a scene. Oh, I'm making a scene. You're the one line about being at work or having coffee with your co-worker boyfriend. Who is? Sophia stood, her arms crossed, defensively. You're overreacting. Nothing is going on. I turned to the man, my anger boiling over. Do you want to back a story up? Or are you just going to stand there? Like a coward? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Something about needing to leave and bolted, practically running for the door. Sophia glared at me as if I were the one in the wrong. The silence between us was suffocating. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I demanded, my voice low, but firm. She rolled her eyes, leaning back against the chair. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I didn't tell you, because I knew you'd react like this. Her complete lack of remorse was like a slap to the face. My hands clenched at my sides. We're going home now. She hesitated, her eyes narrowing, but eventually she grabbed her bag and followed me out. The weight of what I just witnessed pressed down on my chest like a stone. I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The car ride home was thick with silence. Every tick of the blinker and rumble of the engine, amplifying the tension. Sophia sat in the passenger seat. Arms crossed, her gaze locked out the window. She refused to look at me. Her defiance stung almost as much as her lies. When we got home, the quiet broke. As soon as the door closed behind us, I didn't even wait for her to take her coat off. Start talking, I demanded, my voice sharp and cutting. Who was he? And tossed her bag onto the kitchen counter and spun around, glaring at me. What do you want me to say? She snapped, her frustration bubbling over. I already told you. He's a co-worker. We were discussing a project. A project, I repeated, bitterly, crossing my arms. So discussing a project requires lying about being at work and ignoring my calls. She rolled her eyes, throwing her hands in the air. You're being ridiculous. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It wasn't like that. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Tell me what it was like, Sophia, because from where I'm standing, it looked like you were on a date. Her jaw clenched, and I could see the gears turning in her head. She was searching for an excuse, something to deflect or diffuse the situation, but I wasn't letting her off the hook. Not this time. Finally, she sighed, exasperated. We're friends. That's it. I didn't tell you, because I knew you'd blow it out of proportion, just like you're doing now. Blow it out of proportion. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice rising. I caught you sitting in a café with some guy laughing and leaning into him. When you told me you were at work. That's not blowing things out of proportion. Sophia, that's catching you in a lie. Her cheeks flushed with anger, and she crossed her arms, narrowing my stance. You know what, fine. I screwed up. I should have told you. But it's not what you think. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There's nothing going on between us. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of remorse, any hint of the woman I thought I knew, but all I saw was someone trying to spin a narrative, someone more concerned about damage control than the truth. Do you even hear yourself? To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Milburn, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Shaking my head. You lied to me. You deliberately hid where you were and who you were with. If it's so innocent, why not just tell me the truth from the start? She opened her mouth to respond, but stopped herself, her lips pressing into a thin line. That moment of hesitation told me everything I needed to know exactly. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing and patient enthusiasm. My voice called. You didn't tell me, because you knew it wasn't innocent. You knew what you were doing was wrong, and you did it anyway. Sophia's face hardened and she turned away, grabbing a glass from the cabinet and filling it with water. I'm not doing this with you, she muttered. You're impossible to talk to when you're like this. When I'm like this, I repeated, my voice laced with incredulity. You mean when I'm angry? Because my wife is lying to my face. She slammed the glass down on the counter, water sloshing over the rim. I didn't cheat on you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. So stop acting like I did. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I took a step back, my chest heaving. If you expect me to believe that, Sophia, then you need to start being honest. Right now. She hesitated again, her gaze darting to the floor. Fine. Quietly, her tone softening. Maybe I like the attention. Okay, maybe I enjoyed feeling. Wanted her confession hit me like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with tears. I didn't do anything. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I swear, but I won't lie and say, I didn't like it. When someone noticed me, the room felt suddenly smaller, the walls closing in around us. I didn't know whether to be angry or heartbroken. She wasn't denying the connection she had with this man. She was just claiming it hadn't gone further. But how could I believe her? Do you even realize what you're saying? Barely above a whisper. Do you have any idea how much that hurts? Sophia's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw something close to regret on her face. I'm sorry. Her voice cracking. I didn't mean to hurt you then. Why did you? I shot back, my voice trembling with anger and pain. Why lie? Why hide it? If it wasn't more than what you're saying, I don't know. She shouted, tears streaming down her face. Now I don't know why I did it. Okay, I was stupid. I was selfish, but it didn't mean anything. I shook my head, the weight of her words pressing down on me. You say it didn't mean anything, but it meant enough for you to risk everything we have. How am I supposed to trust you after this? Sophia, how am I supposed to believe you? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked away, heading upstairs and slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stood there in the sill, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. The person I thought I knew, the life I thought we had, it all felt like a lie that night. I didn't sleep. My mind raced with every possible scenario, every detail of what I'd seen and what she'd said. Her confession echoed in my ears, twisting the knife deeper with each repetition. By the time the sun rose, I knew I couldn't just take her word for it. I needed to know the truth, the whole truth. And if she wasn't going to give it to me, I'd find it myself. The morning after our confrontation, the house was eerily quiet. Sophia stayed upstairs, the door to our bedroom firmly shut. I sat in the living room, staring blankly at the half-empty mug of coffee in my hands. My mind was a storm of unanswered questions and lingering doubts. Her words from the night before echoed in my head. I didn't mean to hurt you, but she did. I couldn't sit with the uncertainty any longer. I needed clarity, and I wasn't going to get it by waiting for her to come clean. My hands moved almost instinctively as I picked up her laptop from the dining table. It wasn't locked. Sophia rarely used it at home and probably didn't think twice about securing it. That oversight was my opening. The emails were the first place I went. Most were harmless work updates, order confirmations and newsletters. But then I found a thread that made my stomach tight entitled Conference Details. It was an exchange between Sophia and someone named Daniel. His name didn't mean anything to me at first, but I read further. It became painfully clear who he was. The email started out professional enough, but as the thread continued, the tone shifted. They were peppered with inside jokes, flirty comments, and subtle insinuations. One line stood out, like a neon sign: looking forward to seeing you again this weekend. Same room as last time. My heart raced last time. This wasn't a first slip. This wasn't a one-off meeting. This was a pattern. A calculated betrayal. I closed the email thread. My hands, shaking, my gut told me to stop. But I couldn't. I needed to see how deep this went. I opened her calendar and started scrolling through the past months. The late nights, the work trips, the meetings, they all lined up perfectly with Daniel's name, with hotel stays, with moments I'd been left in the dark. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There was the message, a text thread between her and Daniel. It wasn't on her phone. I checked before, but her laptop synced with her messages. The latest one was from him, sent just 2 days ago. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You already can't wait for this weekend. Love you. Love you. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just an affair. It wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a double life. I slammed the laptop shut, the sound reverberating through the room. My chest heaved as I tried to process what I'd found. She hadn't just betrayed me. She built an entirely separate world with this man. A world where I didn't exist. And then the anger came hot. Blinding anger. That burned, turned away the pain, the doubt, the confusion. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only person I trusted to help me navigate this. Ethan arrived an hour later. His face set in a grim expression. He didn't need me to explain. He'd known something was wrong the moment I'd called. What did you find? Sitting across from me, at the kitchen table, I pushed the laptop toward him, my jaw tight. Everything. Emails, messages, hotel bookings. She's been seeing someone named Daniel. Ethan opened the laptop, scanning the screen as he read through the evidence. His expression arc, and this guy, pointing to one of the emails. He works with her. I nodded apparently. And he knows. She's married. I don't know. I admitted. But I wouldn't be surprised if she lied to him too. Ethan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. So what's the plan? Confront her again? No. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Firmly. Not yet. She'll just spin it. Try to make it seem like I'm overreacting. I need something concrete. Something she can't talk her way out of. Ethan nodded. Slowly, his eyes narrowing in thought. You need to catch them in the act. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. It wasn't just about proving her infidelity anymore. It was about reclaiming the truth, about taking back control of my life. The next 2 days were a blur of planning. I tracked Sophia's movements, carefully paying attention to every call, every text, every excuse she gave for leaving the house by Friday night. I had everything I needed. She left early, Saturday morning, claiming she had a last-minute meeting out of town. I knew better. I waited an hour before following her, Ethan riding shotgun. My heart pounded as we drove, my mind racing with every possibility. What if I was wrong? What if this was all a misunderstanding? But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd seen the messages, the emails. There was no going back. We followed her car at a safe distance, winding through streets, until she pulled into the parking lot of a boutique hotel. My stomach churned as I watched her step out of the car, dressed in the same red scarf Daniel had mentioned in his email. It was like a slap in the face. "Here we go," Ethan uttered as I parked a few spaces away. We watched as she walked into the lobby, her phone in hand. Moments later, Daniel appeared. He greeted her with a hug that lingered a second too long, brushing her lower back. They didn't linger in the lobby, heading straight for the elevators. I snapped a photo of them together, my hands surprisingly steady. "Got it," I said quietly. "Now we wait." Ethan nodded, his expression grim. "You got them." "No way. She can't deny this." Now, as the elevator doors closed, I felt a strange mix of relief and devastation. This was it, the proof I needed. But the weight of what I'd just seen was almost unbearable. An hour later, they emerged from the elevator, their demeanor casual and comfortable, like a couple on a weekend getaway. Daniel leaned in, whispering something that made Sophia laugh. A laugh I hadn't heard in months. It twisted the knife deeper and then he kissed her. It wasn't a quick peck or a stolen moment. It was deliberate. I felt my blood boil, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. "Stay calm," Ethan said, his hand on my arm. "You've got what you need. Don't blow it now." But I couldn't sit there and watch any longer. Without a word, I stepped out of the car. He called after me, but I didn't stop. My legs moved on their own, carrying me across the parking lot until I was only a few feet away from them. Sophia saw me first. Her eyes widened, her smile freezing in place. Daniel turned confused at first, but his expression quickly shifted to alarm. "Nice to finally meet you, Daniel. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." My voice cold and steady. He stepped back, glancing between Sophia and me. "Who are you?" His voice wavering. "I'm her husband. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." Letting the words hang in the air like a bomb, the color drained from Daniel's face. He turned to Sophia, who looked like she'd just seen a ghost. Sophia, barely above a whisper. "You're married," Sophia stammered, her composure crumbling. "Daniel, I can explain." I laughed bitterly. "Go ahead." Sophia, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Tell him about the life you've been hiding. Daniel stared at her betrayal, etched into his features. "You lied to me. I didn't mean for it to happen this way." Her voice cracking. "I was going to tell you." "Tell him." "What?" I interrupted, my anger boiling over. "That you've been lying to both of us. That you've been living a double life." Sophia's lips trembled, but she didn't respond. Daniel shook his head, stepping away from her. "I can't believe this," he muttered. I thought you cared about me." "I do," Sophia cried, reaching for him. "I do care about you and me." My voice sharp. "Do you care about me, Sophia? Or was I just collateral damage?" Her tears fell freely now, but they meant nothing to me. I turned to Daniel, my voice cold. "Now you know the truth. She's been playing both of us." Daniel didn't respond. He looked at Sophia one last time, then at me. Without a word, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing there alone. I stared at her, the weight of everything crashing down around us. "You did this," I said quietly, "and now you have to live with it." Her face crumpled, but I didn't stay to see the tears. I turned and walked away, leaving her behind. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of the end. Walking away from that confrontation felt like stepping into a void. My mind buzzed with everything I just witnessed, but my heart felt numb. Ethan was waiting by the car, his expression tight with concern as I approached. "Well," his voice cautious, "to my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's done. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Flatly opening the car door and sliding into the driver's seat, Ethan climbed in beside me, glancing back toward the hotel. Did he know he knows now? I replied, gripping the steering wheel tightly. He didn't even know she was married. Ethan let out a low whistle. That's low, man. Even for her. I nodded, staring straight ahead. He walked away, left her standing there and Sophia. He asked carefully. She cried. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The words bitter on my tongue. Tried to spin it, but there's no spinning this. Not anymore. T didn't say anything else. He just leaned back in his seat as I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot. The ride back was silent. The weight of what had just happened, settling over us, like a thick fog. I didn't feel relief or satisfaction, just a hollow ache that seemed to grow with every mile. When I got home, the emptiness of the house felt oppressive. I went straight to the bedroom, opened her closet and started pulling her clothes off the hangers. I didn't stop until I'd packed enough to fill 2 suitcases. The toiletries followed, swept into a bag without care. It wasn't an act of rage. It was necessity. She didn't belong here anymore. Not after what she'd done. By the time I finished, the suitcases were lined up by the front door, like soldiers waiting for orders. I texted her, "Your things are packed. The locks will be changed by tonight. Let me know when you want to pick them up." Her reply came almost instantly. "Are you serious? We need to talk. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. There was nothing left to say, but I wasn't about to let her dictate how this ended. My reply was short. No more lies. "Sophia, pick up your things and go later that evening." Ethan came by again, bringing beer and a locksmith. While the locks were being changed, we sat on the back porch, the late autumn men chill, biting at our skin. "How are you holding up?" Ethan asked, handing me a beer. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels like I should have seen this coming. I missed all the signs." Ethan shook his head. "Don't do that to yourself. She lied to you. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She made sure you didn't see it coming. That's on her, not you." I took a long sip of beer, the bitterness matching the taste in my mouth. "I still don't understand why she would do this to me, to us." "Because she's selfish," Ethan said, bluntly. "Some people can't see past their own desires. She wanted the thrill, the excitement, and she didn't care who she hurt. To get it." I nodded, knowing he was right, but it didn't make the pain any less sharp. The next day, Sophia showed up. I'd been expecting her, but seeing her car pull into the driveway still sent a pang of anger through me. I watched from the window as she stepped out, her face pale and drawn. She hesitated before ringing the doorbell. I opened the door and stepped aside without a word, gesturing to the suitcases lined up neatly in the entryway. She glanced at them, then back at me. "Can we talk?" Her voice small no. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Firmly, take your things and go. Her eyes welled up with tears. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Please, just let me explain. There's nothing you can say that I haven't already heard. My voice called. You lied to me, Sophia, over and over again. I trusted you and you threw it all away. She looked down, her hands gripping the handle of one of the suitcases. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she whispered. But it did. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sharply. And now you have to deal with the consequences. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought she might argue, but instead, she nodded and began wheeling the suitcases out to her car. I stood in the doorway, watching her every move. When the last suitcase was loaded, she turned to face me. I know I can't fix this. Her voice trembling, but I'm sorry. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. For everything. I didn't respond. I couldn't instead. I stepped back and closed the door, shutting her out for good. Over the next few days, I focused on reclaiming my life. I met with a divorce lawyer laying out everything. I'd found the emails, the messages, the photos. She assured me I had more than enough evidence to protect myself. Okay. The papers were drawn up quickly, and I had them ready to present to Sophia. Her response, what I finally told her, was a mixture of tears and resignation. She signed without a fight, her once fiery defiance, replaced by a weary acceptance. It was the closure I needed, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the end of something that had once been beautiful, now reduced to ashes. One evening, Ethan and I sat in the living room, the quiet hum of the TV in the background. I hadn't told him about Daniel's email yet, the one where he admitted knowing about me, but it had been gnawing at me ever since I found it. Do you think he deserves to get off scot-free? Suddenly, Ethan looked at me. Third. Daniel. Yeah. He knew Ethan. He knew she was married. And he still went along with it. Ethan's jaw tightened. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. No, he doesn't deserve to walk away from this without consequences. I nodded, my resolve hardening. I think it's time he finds out what it feels like to face the truth. The next morning, I tracked down Daniel's contact information through a combination of social media and public records. He worked at a marketing firm downtown, his profile carefully curated to project an image of success and professionalism. I didn't go to his office. I wasn't interested in causing a public scene. I called him, my voice calm and measured, as I introduced myself. This is Alex Carter. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Sophia's husband. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sharp intake of breath. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I didn't expect to hear from you. I'm sure you didn't. But we need to talk. He hesitated, then said, okay, where I gave him the address of a nearby café. One far enough from both our homes and workplaces to avoid unnecessary attention. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. I sat down across from him, my gaze steady. I'm not here to fight. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I just want answers. His face pale. Fair enough. For the next hour, we talked. He told me how it started, how Sophia had drawn him in with stories of an unhappy marriage and a husband who didn't care. He admitted, he believed her, at least at first. But over time, the cracks in her story became harder to ignore. When I found out about you, I wanted to walk away. His voice heavy with guilt. But by then, I don't know, caught up in it. You had a choice. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My tone, cutting. You could have walked away, but you didn't. Looking down at his hands. I know, and I'm sorry. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I really am. I didn't accept his apology. It wasn't for me to forgive him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But as I walked away from that café, I felt a strange sense of closure. Daniel wasn't the villain I'd built up in my head, but he wasn't innocent. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He was just another person caught in the web of Sophia's lies. Back at home, I sat on the back porch, the cool evening air wrapping around me like a blanket. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of pain. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, and betrayal. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. This wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself, but it was a life I could rebuild. And I would, piece by piece, one day at a time. The days after my conversation with Daniel were quieter, but not easier. The initial storm of emotions had passed, leaving behind a sense of emptiness. I couldn't tell if it was relief or just the calm after destruction. Regardless, the silence felt more bearable than the chaos. Sophia had signed the divorce papers without resistance. Her messages had stopped, replaced by a heavy mutual understanding that there was nothing left to say. Daniel was out of the picture, his apology echoing in my head like a hollow refrain, that the damage was done and no amount of remorse could undo it. If unchecked in daily either with a call or by stopping by the house, he was a good friend, one I hadn't appreciated it enough during my marriage. Sophia's betrayal hadn't just shaken my trust in her. It made me reevaluate all my relationships, including the ones I'd neglected. "You've been quiet," Ethan said one evening, as we sat on the back porch, beers in hand. "What's going on in that head of yours?" I stared at the horizon, the sun setting in a wash of orange and pink, just thinking about what's next. I admitted, feels like my whole life was built around her now that she's gone. I don't even know where to start. Ethan nodded, thoughtfully. "Start with you. What do you want? What makes you happy?" The question lingered in the air. It was simple, but overwhelming. I'd spent so much time focused on my marriage, my career, and keeping everything afloat that I'd forgotten what it meant to just be me. The next morning, I dug an old box from the back of my closet. Inside were relics of a life I'd left behind, hobbies and passions I'd abandoned over the years. My sketchbooks were there, filled with half-finished drawings from a time when I thought I might pursue art. I flipped through them, smiling at the memories they brought back. I pulled out my old guitar, the strings dusty and loose from years of neglect, sitting on the living room floor. I tuned it as best I could, and strummed a few chords. The sound was rough, but it felt good, familiar, like finding a piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. Ethan encouraged me to get out of the house more, and I reluctantly agreed. We started small, a trip to the gym, lunch at a new restaurant, even just a walk around the neighborhood. It wasn't much, but it helped. Every step felt like a tiny victory, a reminder that life went on. Even after the worst heartbreak, one afternoon Ethan dragged me to a nearby park. Families played on the grass, couples strolled, hand in hand, and kids laughed as they chased each other. It was bittersweet, seeing the kind of joy I'd once envisioned for myself and Sophia. But it also gave me hope. "You'll have this someday," Ethan said, as if reading my thoughts. "Maybe, but I'm not ready for anything serious. Not for a long time." "That's fair." Clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Just don't shut yourself off completely. You've still got a lot to offer." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I wanted to believe him. I really did. The turning point came on. A quiet Sunday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce paper. As they were signed and ready to be filed, but the finality of it still felt daunting once I submitted them. There'd be no going back. I picked up my phone and called my mom. We hadn't spoken much since everything happened. I wasn't sure how to explain the situation without breaking down. But the moment she answered, her voice, warm and familiar, the words spilled out. Sophia and I are divorcing. To my agent extraordinaire, Myron Nilban. Heartfelt thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice tight. There was a pause and then she said softly, I'm sorry. To my agent extraordinaire, Myron Nilban. Heartfelt thanks to your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I really am. Her sympathy broke something in me, and for the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. I told her everything about Sophia's betrayal, the confrontation with Daniel and how lost I felt. She listened, without judgment, her quiet affirmations grounding me. You'll get through this. It'll take time, but you will. And when you're ready, you'll find someone who truly values you. Her words stayed with me. Long after we hung up, filing the divorce papers felt like crossing a finish line. It wasn't the victory I'd hoped for, but it was closure, her chance to start fresh. Sophia's reaction was subdued when I told her. They were just words over email. No tears or pleas for reconciliation. I hope this brings you peace. She wrote. I really do. It wasn't the apology I wanted, but it was enough to let me move forward one evening. Ethan invited me to a small gathering at his place. It was a mix of his co-workers and friends. People I didn't know, but was grateful to meet. There was laughter, music and a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. I struck up a conversation with a woman named Olivia. She was smart, funny, and had an easy way about her. That put me at ease. We talked about books, music, and everything in between. For the first time in months, I found myself laughing without effort. When the night ended, she handed me her number. Call me if you ever want to grab coffee, she said with a smile. I hesitated, but then I nodded. I might just do that the next morning. I stared at her number for a long time before finally saving it in my phone. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but it felt good to know. There were still people out there worth getting to know. Ethan grinned when I told him about Olivia. See, you're getting back out there already. It's just coffee. To my agent extraordinaire, Myron Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Rolling my eyes, but even I couldn't deny the flicker of excitement I felt. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of everything felt unbearable when I questioned were the right choices. But there were also days of quiet triumph moments when I felt the stirrings of hope and possibility. I threw myself into my work, picking up new projects and challenging myself in ways I hadn't before. I started drawing again, filling sketchbooks with scenes from my life. The park, the coffee shop, the quiet solitude of my home. Each page felt like a step toward rediscovering who I was. And slowly, but surely I began to heal. The months following the divorce marked the beginning of a strange bittersweet chapter in my life. On one hand, the weight of Sophia's betrayal still lingered, casting long shadows over even the brightest days. On the other, there was a freedom I hadn't felt in years, a blank slate to build something new. The house was quieter, now too quiet at first. I'd wake up expecting to hear Sophia moving around, or her voice drifting in from another room. There was just silence, but in time, I started to embrace it. The quiet wasn't emptiness anymore. It was peace. Ethan remained a constant presence. He refused to let me retreat into myself, showing up, unannounced with pizza, or dragging me to the gym. I'd roll my eyes and complain, but I knew he was right. The routines we built together became a lifeline, something to hold on to while I figured out the rest. You know, he said one evening, as we worked out, you're looking a lot better these days physically, but also less like the world's falling apart. I wiped sweat from my face, smirking. High praise. I guess. I mean, you, Ray bouncing back. Man, keep at it. Wasn't until later staring at my reflection in the locker room mirror that I realized he was. Right. I did look better. Not just physically, but in the way I carried myself. Stronger. Lighter. Like I was finally beginning to leave the past behind. One Saturday morning, I decided to tackle the bedroom. Sophia's absence had left her side of the closet and dresser empty. A glaring reminder of what was gone. I'd avoided dealing with it, but it was time. I sorted through old photos, trinkets and souvenirs from trips we'd taken together. Some of it went into a box for storage, but most of it ended up in the trash. It wasn't an angry purge, just a practical one. These things didn't belong in my life anymore, and holding on to them wasn't going to help me move forward. By the time I was finished, the room felt different, lighter. It was a small step, but it mattered. Olivia's number stayed in my phone untouched. I thought about texting her, but every time I picked up my phone, doubt crept in. What if I wasn't ready? What if it was too soon? What if I ruined something good before it even started? Aoife noticed my hesitation and called me out on it. What are you waiting for? She gave you her number, didn't she? Yeah. But no but, he interrupted. It's just coffee. You're not signing a contract. Stop overthinking it. He was right. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. So one evening after much internal debate, I sent her a message. Olivia, and I met at a small café near her office. I arrived early, my nerves buzzing as I sipped on an espresso when she walked in. Her smile instantly put me at ease, hey? Sliding into the seat across from me. Glad you called me too, I admitted, surprised by how much I meant it. Our conversation flowed easily. She was sharp, funny and refreshingly direct. We talked about everything from work to travel to the latest books we'd read. She didn't pry into my past, but when I mentioned the divorce, she didn't flinch or offer empty platitudes instead. She nodded, thoughtfully. That kind of thing changes. You, she said, but it doesn't have to define you. Her words stayed with me long after. We said goodbye over the next few weeks. Olivia and I saw each other a handful of times. Dinner, a movie, a walk through the park. Each time felt effortless, like we were just two people enjoying each other's company without any pressure or expectations. I told Ethan about her expecting his usual teasing, but instead, he just smiled and said, "Good for you. Deserve this, did." I wasn't sure, but I was starting to believe that maybe I did one evening as Cla and I sat on a bench overlooking the water. She turned to me with a curious expression. "Can I ask you something?" To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. What do you want? Not just with us, but in general. What are you hoping to find? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't given it much thought. My focus had been on surviving, not planning. But as I considered her words, an answer began to take shape. I want to rebuild. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Finally, my life, my sense of self, everything. I'm not looking for a quick fix or a distraction. I just want something real. She smiled. Her eyes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. That's a good answer. As the weeks turned into months, life began to feel less like a struggle and more like a journey. I threw myself into work, taking on new challenges and projects that reignited my passion. I reconnected with old friends, rebuilding relationships. I let slip away, and through it all, Olivia was there, not as a replacement for what I'd lost, but as a reminder that there was still good in the world, that I could still find joy and connection. Even after everything I'd been through one afternoon, as I flipped through my sketchbook, I realized how far I'd come. The pages were filled with drawings of places I'd visited, people I'd met, and moments that had shaped me. Each sketch was a testament to the resilience I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't fully healed. Maybe I never would be, but I was living again, and that was enough for now. It was more than enough. A year after the divorce, life had finally settled into a new rhythm. The ache that had once consumed me had dulled to a manageable throb. A reminder of what I'd endured and overcome. The house, once haunted by memories of Sophia, had become a space entirely my own. A sanctuary filled with things that brought me joy rather than pain. LA had become a significant part of my life. What started as casual coffee dates had blossomed into something deeper, something steady. She was patient, never pushing me to move faster than I was ready for. Her presence was a steadying force, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. One evening, as we sat on the couch with a movie playing in the background, Claire turned to me with a serious expression. "Can I ask you something?" To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Muting the TV. Do you trust me? The question took me by surprise. Yes, I replied, without hesitation. Why would you ask that? She shrugged, her fingers tracing patterns on the edge of her glass. I know what you went through with Sophia. It'd be understandable if you had doubts about relationships. I considered her words carefully. It's not that simple. I admitted. What happened with Sophia shook me to my core. It made me question everything I thought I knew about love and trust. Trust. But with you, it feels different. How? So, she asked, her voice soft. You don't hide things. You don't make me guess what you're thinking. You're honest, even when it's uncomfortable. I paused, searching for the right words. You make me feel safe, and that's not something I take for granted. Olivia smiled, her eyes glistening. You make me feel safe too. That's rare. You know, the topic of trust lingered in my mind long after that conversation. It wasn't just about Olivia. It was about me. About how I wanted to approach relationships. Moving forward. Sophia's betrayal had left scars, but I didn't want those scars to define me. I wanted to build something better, something stronger. To do that, I needed to let go of the fear that history would repeat itself. One afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I came across an old box labeled Sophia. Inside were remnants of our life together. Wedding photos, anniversary cards, and small trinkets from vacation we'd taken. I hadn't been ready to face these things after the divorce, but now I felt an odd sense of detachment. I flipped through the items, each one a snapshot of a time when I thought our love was unshakable. There was no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet acceptance of what had been, and what was no longer. I packed everything back into the box and carried it to the curb for donation. It was time to let go for real this time. Olivia and I planned a weekend getaway to a cabin by the lake. A chance to unplug and reconnect. The drive was filled with laughter and music. The kind of easy companionship I hadn't realized I missed until I found it again. On the second night, as we sat by the fire with the stars above us, Olivia leaned her head on my shoulder. Do you ever think about what comes next? Sometimes, I admitted, but I've learned not to plan too far ahead. Life has a way of surprising you. She chuckled. That it does. We fell into a comfortable silence, the crackling fire filling the space between us. I reached for her hand, lacing my fingers with hers. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you in it. Her grip tightened, and she looked up at me with a smile that could have lit up the night. Me too. The following weeks were a blur of work weekends with CLI and quiet evenings spent, reflecting on how far I'd come. I'd started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. The act of creating something from nothing felt cathartic, a way to channel all the emotions I couldn't put into words. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The supportive friend teased me about my newfound hobby. Look at you, the tortured artist. He joked, as he had one of my half-finished canvases. What's next, poetry? I shot back, smirking. Don't underestimate me. He laughed, clapping me on the shoulder. I'm proud of you. Man, you've come a long way. One evening as Olivia and I prepared dinner together, she asked a question that stopped me in my tracks. Do you ever think about forgiveness? I repeated, setting down the knife I was holding. For who? For Sophia. Not for her sake, but for yours. I leaned against the counter, considering her words. Forgiveness had never been something I'd actively pursued. I'd been too focused on survival, on rebuilding, to think about letting go of the anger I still carried. I don't know. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Honestly, part of me feels like forgiving her would mean excusing what she did. Olivia shook her head. Forgiveness isn't about excusing. It's about freeing yourself from the hold it has on you. Anger can be heavy. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You don't have to carry it forever. Her words stayed with me, long after she left that night. Weeks later, I found myself sitting in a quiet park. The box of Sophia's things, still in the trunk of my car. I hadn't donated it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Unsure of whether I was truly ready to part with it, but I sat there, watching the leaves fall and listening to the soft rustle of the wind. I realized CLA was right. The anger, the pain, it was still a part of me, but didn't have to define me. I opened the box one last time, letting myself feel the memories it held without judgment or bitterness. Then I closed it and walked it to a donation bin, leaving it behind for good. It wasn't a grand moment, but it was a step forward. And sometimes that's all you need. Months passed, and life continued to evolve in ways I hadn't expected. My relationship with Olivia grew deeper, steady and unshakable. I rediscovered joy in simple things. Painting, morning runs, even the quiet peace of an evening spent reading. But the shadows of my past still lingered, especially when reminders of Sophia surfaced unexpectedly. One rainy afternoon, I received an email that stopped me cold. The sender was Sophia. The subject line simply read closure. My hand hovered over the delete button, but something compelled me to open it. The message was brief. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I've spent the past year trying to understand myself, to own up to my mistakes. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry for everything. I hope you found happiness. Sophia. I stared at the screen, a flood of emotions washing over me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Hurt, confusion, but also a strange sense of relief. This wasn't an attempt to worm her way back into my life. It was an acknowledgement of her actions, something I never thought I'd get that evening. I told Olivia about the email. She listened quietly, her brow furrowed in thought. What are you going to do? I don't know. I admitted. Part of me wants to ignore it, but another part feels like maybe this is the closure I didn't know I needed. Claire reached across the table, her hand covering mine. You don't owe her anything. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. But if responding helps you move forward, then do it for you, not for her. I nodded, her words settling in my mind later that night. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank reply screen. Finally, I began typing. Sophia, I appreciate you reaching out. I won't lie. What you did hurt me in ways I'm still working to understand. But I've moved on. I've built a life for myself that I'm proud of. And part of that has been letting go of the anger I carried for so long. I wish you the best. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It wasn't a long email, but it said everything I needed to. I hit send and felt an unexpected weight lift from my shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness in the way Olivia had described, but it was a step closer. The following week, I received a call from Ethan. His tone was uncharacteristically serious. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I ran into Sophia. She was at the grocery store. We only talked for a minute, but she mentioned you. What did she say? My grip tightening on the phone. She's moving out of state, something about a fresh start. She wanted me to tell you. She's glad you're doing well. I didn't know how to respond. The idea of Sophia leaving felt strange, like a final chapter of a book I hadn't realized was still open. Thanks for letting me know. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. No problem, you. Okay. Yeah. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And for the first time, I meant it. As the months turned into a year, the memories of Sophia became less sharp, less painful. I stopped replaying the betrayal in my head. Stopped wondering if I could have done something differently instead. I focused on the life I was building with Olivia. One crisp autumn evening, as we walked along the river, Olivia stopped suddenly and turned to me. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Can I ask you something, of course? To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Smiling at her. Do you think you can ever marry again? Her question caught me off guard. For so long, marriage had felt like a closed door. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I had no intention of revisiting, but as I looked at Olivia, her eyes filled with hope and vulnerability, I realized my answer had changed. So I said, softly, with the right person. She smiled, her hand tightening around mine. Good. Because I think I found the right person to. 1 year later, we stood together in a small garden, surrounded by friends and family. Olivia wore a simple, elegant dress, her smile brighter than the sun. As we exchanged vows, I felt a peace I hadn't thought possible this time. There were no doubts, no shadows lingering in the corners of my mind. I wasn't trying to erase the past or pretend it hadn't happened. I was building something new, something stronger, something real. As we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, I caught sight of Ethan in the crowd, his grin as wide as the horizon. He gave me a thumbs up, and I couldn't help but laugh. This was my life now. Not perfect, but mine. And for the first time in years, I was truly unequivocally happy. Life moved forward in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The echoes of the past no longer felt like chains, but like lessons I had learned and grown from Olivia. And I settled into married life with a rhythm that felt natural, easy. She wasn't just my partner. She was my best friend, my confidant, and the woman who reminded me every day what it meant to truly love and be loved in return. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes in our new home, Olivia stumbled upon an old photo album. Is this yours? She asked, holding it up. I nodded, smiling as I wiped the sweat from my brow. Yeah, from years ago. Haven't looked at it in ages. She sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through the pages. I joined her, and together, we laughed at my awkward teenage years, cringing at questionable haircuts and outdated fashion choices. But as she turned a page, she paused, her smile fading slightly. It was a picture of Sophia and me. We were at a beach, arms around each other, grinning, like we didn't have a care in the world for a moment. The room fell silent. You okay? Olivia asked, gently, her voice cautious. I took a deep breath, studying the photo. Yeah. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Finally, it's strange seeing this. Now it feels like a lifetime ago, like I'm looking at someone else's story. She closed the album, setting it aside. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. I met her gaze, gratitude swelling in my chest. I know, but I don't feel the need to. Not anymore. It was the truth. The scars Sophia had left were still there. Faint, but present, yet they no longer defined me. They were part of my story, though they didn't dictate my future. Months later, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. The envelope was plain. The handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a simple note. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I hope this finds you well. I don't know if you'll ever fully forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I finally started forgiving myself. It took a lot of time and soul searching, but I'm working to be a better person. I heard you got married again. Congratulations. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Take care, Sophia. I sat with the letter for a long time. Emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to rip it up, to reject any reminder of her. But another part, the part that had grown, healed and learned, felt something close to peace. I placed the letter in a drawer, not out of sentimentality, but as a quiet acknowledgement of a chapter that had finally truly closed. One evening, as Claire and I sat on our porch, watching the sunset, she rested her head on my shoulder. You've been quiet today. What's on your mind? Pressing a kiss to her hair. Just thinking about how lucky I am. She chuckled, her fingers lacing through mine. You're not so bad yourself. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, I realized how far I'd come. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, they were all part of the journey that led me here. And for that, I was strangely grateful. Years later, as Claire and I welcomed our first child into the world, I found myself reflecting on the twists and turns life had taken. Holding our daughter in my arms, I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose, of clarity. The man I was, when Sophia and I stood at the altar, seemed like a distant memory. A ghost of a life that no longer fit. The lessons I'd learned through pain had shaped me into someone stronger, someone better. And now, as I looked into my daughter's eyes, I knew I was ready to give her a life filled with love, trust and unwavering support. As I laid her down in her crib that night, Claire wrapped her arms around me. From behind, "She's perfect," she whispered. I agreed, my voice full of emotion. Olivia rested her chin on my shoulder. We've come a long way, haven't we? I turned to look at her, the woman who had restored my faith and love. We have. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer held the power to define me. I had built a new life, one filled with honesty, love and hope, and for the first time in years, I felt truly whole. The circle had closed, and I was finally free. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened.